Okay, so hello everyone out there in internet land. Welcome to another episode of the Conservation Equation. My name is Derek, aka BigCatDerek, and I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Dr. Lara Elizabeth Warren, and she has a PhD in molecular, cellular, and integrative physiology from UC Davis over in California. But that's not the coolest thing about her. She also has a very interesting job down in Houston. Would you like to tell everyone where that is?
Sure. Well, I work at Johnson Space Center, which is one of the NASA centers that are all over the United States. And my job right now is I work in the International Space Station Program Science Office. So we're responsible for all of the science that happens on the space station, which is
That,
pretty cool.
yeah, yeah. That's a monumentally cool thing, and the fact that you're taking part in my silly little venture, I appreciate very much so. You can imagine my delights and my surprise when I got your email and it said like, yeah, I don't know if you'd like for me to be in it, but I work at NASA, and I was like, yes, of course, please, I would, yes, that would be fine, that would be fine.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so basically the one of the main jobs that you have is to help mitigate against some of the logistical factors for the effects of space flight on the human body. Is that kind of the gist of
That
it?
is correct. Now, living in space, it sure looks like a lot of fun, right? Because you're floating and everything floats and you can play with your food, but it's actually not very good for the human body. You can kind of think of it as your body being very, very efficient. We've all experienced probably in our lives a time when we didn't go to the gym very much and maybe laxed on working out, and you notice that your muscles they lose their strength. You get a little flabby, right?
Yeah,
The same thing happens in space. If you're not using muscles and if you're not using bone and if you're not using your cardiovascular system very much, there's a tendency for those systems to get weaker. So
sure.
astronauts lose bone mass, they have muscle atrophy and their cardiovascular systems get weaker. To mitigate that, we have to do quite a bit of exercise in space to keep up all of those systems. And it works pretty well. We're able to keep our astronauts in pretty good shape, but it's not a perfect system. They still come back sometimes with a little bit of bone loss or a little bit
Sure.
of muscle loss, but our goal is to not let them lose much.
So yeah, I'm sure that the weight program is not going to be happening too well up there. There's not going to be too much CrossFit happening up on the ISS then.
Not so much per se. We do have exercise equipment though that has been specially designed to work in a microgravity environment. We
Oh
have
wow.
a treadmill, and it's not a regular treadmill. The treadmill is one that you have to wear a backpack harness that straps you down to the treadmill.
Sure,
We have
sure,
a stationary bicycle, and that bike doesn't have a seat, so that's a little different.
sure.
And then we have something called the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. We like acronyms at NASA. We call it ARED.
A red.
And that is a resistive exercise device. It's kind of like weightlifting, but
So
you're
it's
not lifting
was
weights
it kind of
because
like
there's no such thing in space.
do you have like a colloquial kind of like you're like, hey red, you're like talking to like almost like almost like a Hal kind of thing, just like, hey, it's red, come on, go do some
Maybe.
push-ups on him.
Yeah, maybe. But so these exercise devices work in concert as well as good enough nutrition, proper nutrition,
Sure.
and it's helping. Just like on Earth, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Absolutely. Now, um, a lot of people out there, they might be, looking at the interview that we're or the conversation that we're having, and they might say like, "Well, Derek, how does this is very interesting and fascinating, but how does it fit into the conservation equation?" Now, the thing that we were talking about, a lot of the stuff that we were talking about previously was saying that by doing the research that you do studying the physiologic effects of humans going into space, that you folks are actually stumbling on a lot of different insights just on just fundamental biology in and of itself. Is that correct?
That is correct. Of course, the mission of the International Space Station is to do research. And it took a long time to build the space station, and now it is a world-class research facility in orbit. And some of the research that we're doing is on human research.
Mm-hmm.
Other is biological sciences and biology, biotechnology, physical sciences.
Sure.
We do some technology development and even Earth and space science. And the really cool thing is when you go to a microgravity environment, biology fundamentally stays the same,
Okay.
but it allows you to unlock some keys that were previously not so much obvious to us. So we take, for example, cancer cells up into space to see, are they made more vicious? Are they turned on by space? Are they turned off? Can we learn something about the molecular mechanisms inside those cells that we can potentially use to target cancer here on Earth? I mentioned bone loss in astronauts. If we figure out how to keep astronauts from losing bone in space, that's very applicable to osteoporosis and other bone disease here on Earth. Muscle wasting as well.
Well,
and so we have a catchphrase. Oh, go ahead.
No. I want to hear your catchphrase before I say my not very smart thing that I'm probably going to say.
So our catchphrase is, we're doing research off the Earth for the Earth.
Very nice. I like that. I can see it on the billboard right now in the board meeting, you know, like that's very nice. All the suits and ties, everyone's clapping. I like it. Very good. I was just going to say, we have a couple lions that have experienced some genetic degenerative bone maladies. So, I mean, a lot of these different things, of course, you know, could be absolutely applicable to the stuff that we're doing down here.
And immune disease as well. Autoimmune disease really causes arthritis, and sometimes elderly cats can end up with some arthritic situations, and really that tracks to an immune problem in many cases. And we're studying the immune system in space as well.
Sure.
So potentially, sometime down the road, we're going to have some better answers.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I'm actually having some issues with my internet connection right now. I've got one. We've got multiple Wi-Fi connections out here. I'm going to actually go ahead and sign off of the one, hook onto the other, and then I'm going to recall you because some of the stuff you're saying some great things, but it's coming through kind of choppy and everything.
Okay.
I don't want it to sound all goofy when we finally actually post this thing. So let me go ahead and I'm going to stop the
Sure.
Okay, sorry about that. Had some technological snafus, but I feel very silly that I'm actually talking to one of the a very bright mind of one of the most prestigious institutions in the planet, as far as, you know, having the wellspring of technology that you guys have access to, and I can't seem to get my Wi-Fi working properly. So,
yeah, internet, you know, it happens.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so do you actually help to develop some of the technologies then, based on or are you a little bit more just pure like science and like trying to just like gain insight and whatnot, or do you actually throw your 2 cents into how certain things are designed and constructed?
Well, it's a little bit of both.
Sure.
My current position is largely based on trying to communicate the science that we're doing on the space station. So I'm talking about other people's science experiments, really. I did some of my own human research experiments previously, but right now I'm focused on helping the general public understand why we have a space station, that we have a space station at all, and that you can see it, you know, flying over in the night or evening sky.
Sure.
So my job right now is to get the word out.
Okay, well, I think the question in everyone's mind, tigers in space, when's that happening?
Probably not anytime soon.
Okay, I just had to ask that, you know, my followers, they want to know.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to go for the hard hitting ones right now.
Right, right, right.
I mean, I think that it would make for a good movie, something like that, kind of like almost like an Alien type thing,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Alien had a cat in space. So.
It did. It did.
Jonesy.
What are actually? I got to ask you that. What are some of your favorite? What are some of your favorite sci-fi movies or sci-fi TV shows or anything like that? I really I want to know.
I'm a big Star Wars fan,
Okay.
and I like the Alien movies as well.
Well,
Um,
and here's one thing also I got to ask you
yeah,
because, by the way, the internet connection's working a lot better on this one.
I agree.
Yeah, there you go. So, there's times where the people they'll ask me, like, "Oh, this movie's got a tiger in it. You must love that." And I'm like, "No, most of the time I don't because they get it wrong." And I
Yeah,
can't help but just look at the thing that they're getting wrong. And I'm like, that's not the sound that they make. A tiger wouldn't do that in that situation. They would not be friends. I'm just saying all of these things. I'm imagining that. Do you have a problem with that sometimes too? Like when you're watching things of a science nature and you're like, that's not how that works.
yes, very often. But there's other times when I can just suspend that
Sure.
disbelief, that scientific mind. But it depends. Like the movie Gravity
Okay.
a couple of years ago that came
Sure.
out. Beautiful. I mean, that was a fantastic visual
Hmm.
representation of
Hmm.
being in space. There was some pretty big flaws in the physics,
Hmm.
but you know what? I was able to just enjoy the movie
Okay.
for what it was and not get too wrapped up into the finding the things that were wrong with it.
Of course. Of course. So you have your okay gravity. That's the example that Life of Pi. If you ever want to know what it's like
Oh,
to be on a boat with a tiger, that's. I mean, I best representation of a tiger I've ever seen on film ever.
yeah.
Yeah, and
Because it
because
was computer animated, right?
yeah, that's the funny thing. Because tigers, I mean, they're jerks, and that's exactly what they would be like if they were on a boat with you. They're not nice. You're not going to make friends with it. So
Mm.
that's one thing I will say. Anyway,
Have you ever seen a seasick tiger, or do you think tigers would get seasick?
I'd probably, and then they'd get ornery, and then they'd want to bite.
Mm.
Anytime that you, because they're emotional animals, and they, they're like little kids. They don't have impulse control, and if they get sick or if they feel icky or if they're a little bit emotional, then they're going to be impulsive and they're going to just want to bite things. That's just how they deal with their problems.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Okay, so how long have you been working with the ISS?
So I moved out to Houston to work on what I'm doing 11 years ago.
Oh wow.
And I moved here from the San Francisco Bay
Mhm.
Area. And I love my job. I knew that I wanted to work at NASA when I was a kid. I don't really even remember a time that I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Really?
But I know that when I was in high school,
Hmm.
I kind of narrowed it down a little bit. I knew I wanted to work at NASA. I
Hmm.
knew
Hmm.
that I really liked biology, but I didn't know that I could do biology and physiology at NASA. I thought I'd have to pick.
Hmm.
Well, it turns out there was a space shuttle mission that launched when I was in high school that was totally focused on life sciences, biology, and physiology.
Oh, that's pretty
Of
cool.
course, I read about that in the newspaper, and it was a light bulb went off. I was like, that is what I'm going to go do. And so
That's
I
what you
was
do.
fortunate. I always knew what I wanted to do.
That's I think that's actually I love stories like that when people they have a purpose, they have a dream, they have a goal, and then they because you're now able to tell the story like from a point A to B perspective, but there was probably just a metric crap ton of hard work that you had to
Yeah.
do between the points between the point A and the point B. So yeah,
Well, yeah, having a goal is a good thing because it kind of helps set your compass, if you
yeah.
will. You don't always know the path that will occur in between where you are and where you want to be,
Hmm.
but if you have an idea of what your end goal is, that helps you make decisions along the way. And that's the advice I usually give young people is that, you know, each step that you make sure it's toward your goal, and if it's not, you can always backstep and make sure you're on the right path. Um, and even if you don't really know what you want to do, it's okay.
Yeah, it's good. Well, I never set out to be a tiger rancher. That just sort of happened. But
Yeah, yeah.
that's those things like you don't know where things are going to go, and it just so happens.
Things work out.
Things just kind of work out. Okay. Actually, I wanted to, because your expertise on physiology. We had a snow leopard. His name was Arctic. He recently passed. He had an antibiotic resistant strain of bacteria that resided in his lungs.
Mm.
And my wife, who is the founder of the facility over here, she's talked with a lot of different people about their snow leopards that they've had, and most other people will have them in lower altitude locales. Like here in Bridgeport, Texas, we're about 1,100 feet off of sea level, something like
Okay.
that. Now you're talking about snow leopards that they're living thousands and thousands of feet, above sea level in the Himalayas and Tibet and Nepal and Mongolia and all those places. I guess there's something to be said about the prolonged effects of such a sharp altitude adjustment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for animals, I guess what would be, just based on your knowledge of human physiology, like someone who I guess is evolved to live in lower altitudes, like living a very prolonged, like even we're talking like decades
Yeah.
of time in a much higher altitude. And like, I guess what are some of the things that could definitely, I guess, happen, or vice versa,
Well, that is an interesting question. So, the human body, we're actually surprisingly adaptable
Hmm.
for life on most of this planet's surface. There's definitely places that are too high in altitude or too low in altitude or
Hmm.
too
Hmm.
cold or too hot for us, really. But we're amazingly adaptable. Who would have thought that we could live in space? We're actually later this month, we're launching a person to live on the international, two people actually, to live on the International Space Station
Really?
for an entire year.
Oh, wow.
Usually we stay for 6 months at a time, but we're wanting to go a little bit longer and a little bit farther, so we're trying to push the boundaries of our knowledge.
And that's where folks like you have to come in to make sure that people, are able to their bodies are able to just kind of exist
Right.
in those type
And
space.
we think we know what will happen, but we're not absolutely sure. Now, when you're talking about altitude, all kinds of changes happen in the body in animals and in humans when you make a big adjustment, as you
Sure.
mentioned, in altitude. Um, but usually within a couple of weeks, all of those adjustments are made.
Hmm.
So, I teach a class in physiology, and I always tell my students, just as a hypothetical, let's pretend we all just suddenly arrived in Denver, Colorado, mile high city.
Sure.
In Houston, we're basically at 0 feet. We're
Hmm.
at sea level. And a mile doesn't sound like it's very high, a little more than 5,000 feet.
Hmm.
But if you come from sea level and you show up in Denver and you go and try and run a couple miles, very quickly you're going to find out that have not acclimated.
Yeah.
And people who go skiing
Hmm.
find this out too. You can dehydrate, you get nasty headaches, and you can end up with some altitude sickness.
Sure.
Now, the other way around, you took an animal that is traditionally evolved to live in a high altitude.
Hmm.
And when it lives in a low altitude, it had to go through an adjustment to do so. A little bit of, probably at first, its blood was a little bit thick, and then it thinned back down, kind of
Okay.
made all kinds of adjustments. Even the oxygen carrying capacity of the animal's blood will change, the myoglobin, the proteins in the blood and in the muscle that carry oxygen, which
Sure.
every cell in your body needs, went through an adjustment. Um, but after months, I would say, of acclimation, an animal or a person should be just fine. So
Hmm.
I
Well, he was born.
hesitate.
He was actually born here,
Oh,
so
gosh. Okay.
yeah.
So evolutionarily, though, his genes are probably, or the animal's genes are probably uh, uh, more tended toward high altitude physiological adaptation,
Okay.
but maybe several generations, his parents and he's been the offspring of animals that were born closer to sea level.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I can't imagine that there's be anything that's irreversible.
Okay, well, and well, you might like this because for a long, because I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of snow leopards, but they have like they've really got weird heads. I mean, their eyes are like they're bulbous and they're like really set far apart. And I used to call, and Arctic was our snow leopard. I used to call him. I used to say he looked like an alien, and my wife hated that because that was like her boy. And it was like,
Oh.
you know, yeah, she didn't care, but it's just like, don't call him an alien. And I'm like, well, he is. And I was telling my followers that, and then everyone said like, oh my gosh, he does. So I had to basically have those conversations with my wife, like, look, honey, it's like thousands of people to you. We,
The
what are you gonna
numbers
do?
alone here.
So, but he was, yeah, he kind of got kind of, you know, known as kind of like a space, like a space explorer, just based on that and the whole thing. So I figured that that was, again, I'm doing the same thing. I'm doing the same thing that people are doing to me, like, oh, well, it's a space thing, so you must like it. Oh, gee, it's a tiger thing. You must really love it, huh,
Just
Derek?
like
I'm like,
it.
I'm just like, I'm talking to the space lady.
So I better mention aliens. So.
I don't know. I'm just trying. I'm actually, because I believe it or not, I when I talk to people who are like yourself and they're very educated, you know, and they've not only been educated but they've been working on these very ambitious things, and I actually I get a little bit intimidated. I'm just like, oh my gosh, don't do anything to make yourself sound even dumber than you already are. So
No, you know, we're we're all in this together, and that's kind of one of the cool things about the fact that, you know, I work with science on the space station.
yeah,
You're working with animals here on the ground and taking care of tigers. What could we possibly have in common? But, you know, we're all on this little planet together, and we're all taking care of each other.
yeah,
And what we're learning in space, it seems pretty far away from care. But you know what? We may end up finding out something someday that helps your tigers live longer, and that
absolutely.
may help all tigers live longer. Um, you know, we're studying the Earth from space as
Hmm.
well. We have a number of instruments that are, you know, observing the Earth, learning more about our climate, really cool stuff. And it's, again, all the intent of learning about what we do and our basically increasing knowledge.
Yes.
Uh, every astronaut I've talked to, when they get back from space, they're a little bit changed in that they see our planet a little bit differently. You don't
Well,
see borders. You don't see the troubles between, you know, man. You just see a beautiful planet in space, and this very, very thin atmosphere is all we have, and it kind of, you become in a little bit more of a of an appreciation for how little we have and how we need to take care of it, and that includes people, animals, oceans, land, everything.
beautiful.
So,
Isn't that I've heard of that. I've heard that that's actually I don't even know why I'm mentioning it now because I can't tell you what the effect is called, but I've heard that it's like the disc, the what you're
yeah.
talking about. It actually has a name, but like I said, I probably shouldn't have even mentioned it because I can't think of the name, and now everyone's just going to be just kind of wondering what the name of it is. Oh
I,
well, you got Google. Everyone's got
yeah,
Google out there. You do. Just you know,
look it up.
I'm addressing all the people now because they're
Yes.
going to be on the comment section, just being just like, you know, you probably should have like maybe done your homework a little bit more. And I'm like, you know what? Why don't you just be quiet? I'm talking to the space lady. Okay. Now, based on your knowledge of kind of where we're at right now, what are some of the next like chronological milestones? And because I was asking, I was writing down notes, and I was thinking like, well, where are we going to be in 5 years? Where are we going to be in 10 years? I don't want to think about that. I want to think like, what are the next major chronological milestones of spaceflight that we're on the trajectory towards?
You know, and it's a great question. We're in the business of learning and doing whatever the administration and our government tells us to do.
Sure.
So eventually, you know, long term, we're going to go to Mars, and
Hmm.
it's going to take a tremendous effort to get there. And we don't have all the pieces of knowledge right now. We're building, putting together building blocks essentially to
Sure.
learn how to get there. It's not just the technology. There's some challenges there. It's also the human aspect. Um, I mentioned some of the detrimental effects of being in space. There's also radiation, and that becomes a pretty serious problem when you leave
Sure.
Earth's protective magnetic belts. We
Hmm.
have the Van Allen belts that actually protect all of us from a
Hmm.
lot
Hmm.
of radiation. Um, so next building blocks uh, are on the way to Mars. And I don't know exactly what those are. We may go to the moon next and establish a colony there.
Sure.
We may find that we want to go to an asteroid and start mining resources and from the asteroid belt. Or we may go directly to Mars. The exact steps I'm unsure of. I don't know what those exactly are going to be. I'll support whatever our president and our
Yeah,
administration
yeah,
wants
yeah,
us to
yeah.
do. But what we need to learn is how to live in space, how to
Hmm.
protect ourselves. We want to have people be able to come back home to Earth in
Sure.
a healthy manner, and we want to develop technologies. You don't want to find out halfway to Mars that you didn't really figure out your oxygen generation system.
That would be awkward.
You want to know before you leave that you figured it out.
Yeah, no
We have
kidding.
a lot to learn.
Now I'm sure that you've like done as far as your work with like the NASA and work with space and then being a physiologist. That you had to learn a lot of historical cases of different things that have happened and lessons that have been learned.
Yeah.
The I mean, like going back into the days where like they were basically catapulting dogs and monkeys up into low Earth orbit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure that there were quite a few lessons still that came back from even stuff like that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I kind of consider myself a little bit of a space nerd in that I
Hmm.
love trivia like that.
Okay.
And it's fun for me to learn from our past lessons. And in fact,
Sure.
it's we took some very important steps along the way, and those were let's send some animals into space to see if it's even possible to have life in space. And so our animal friends took those first steps for us. And Laika is a famous dog the Russians sent to space, and we had
Yeah.
some famous chimpanzees
Hmm. Hmm.
and uh, um, and then even our early human space flights, we weren't sure even if people could function. That's why we sent some animals first. But
Oh wow.
it's been
Imagine being the
interesting
being the first, just like, all right, well, I don't know. You think they got a little bit of hazard pay for that one? Being the
it
first?
probably didn't get much hazard
Probably
pay.
didn't get
It
much. Oh
probably did.
no. Well, yeah, that's true. Okay. Now, as far as like things like the Kurzweil and the whole law of accelerating returns and the exponential growth of information-based technology, have you seen just in your time of being in such close concert with NASA and whatnot, have you seen almost like an exponential growth of their technological abilities, like the processing power of the problems that we're now able to solve as opposed to even just 5 or 10 years ago? I mean, have you seen any kind of differences, or is it kind of an exciting kind of time to be a science person?
Oh, well, absolutely. It's always exciting to be a science person because there's always more to know. Um, but to answer your question, it's a little bit of both.
Hmm.
When you're immersed in something, I think people get a little they take it for granted. And what we're doing in space right now is actually amazing. There are days that, sure, it's just another day at work, but that's ridiculous. I'm gonna have to pinch myself and say, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What we're doing is incredibly cool and it is incredibly challenging. This is hard stuff.
No kidding.
In November of this year, we're going to reach a milestone 15 years of continuous human presence on the International Space Station.
That is
That
cool.
means if you're less than 15 years old, as long as you've been alive, we've had people on the space station.
That's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
And the problems that we're solving, are they any more complicated? Well, yes and no. Um, to have the audacity to build this space station was pretty grand, and we had to start from somewhere. We started from zero. We
Okay.
started with nothing, and so now we have a full space station. So right there, that is a tremendous change just in 15 years. Um, are the problems that we're solving? Sometimes it seems a little bit slow because science takes a long time to get results and to fully vet them and understand what they mean.
Hmm.
So that sometimes seems slow, but that's just science. And so sometimes it feels like things are going slow. Other times, like a blink of an eye. I've been here
Sure.
11 years, and it's amazing. I have friends that go live in space for 6 months and then
That is
they
pretty
come
cool.
back, and that's amazingly cool
Okay, so
stuff.
your space friends, when they get back, like, like because do they just want to, do they I don't know, do they want to like eat like a certain type of food, or do they what are some of the things that they miss, from being up there? Of course,
Well,
besides their families, besides the
yeah,
obvious, like, oh, my wife and kids. I mean, I understand that. Yes,
yeah.
yes, those are the answers that they're gonna give. But I'm talking just like those other little like odd spice of life
Mm,
type things.
a shower.
Yeah. Okay.
Miss
Sure.
having a shower.
Yeah.
Miss pizza.
Pizza.
Um, and
Does pizza like explode in space or something?
yeah, they just don't get
Doesn't.
pizza.
Oh, okay, I didn't
Right.
know if it.
Can't be an astronaut if you can't handle
You heard it here today, folks. Pizza explodes in space.
that. And here's an interesting thing that you wouldn't necessarily think of. People have been in space for a while. When they first get back to Earth, the smells,
Oh,
they miss rain. They miss
yeah.
the
Sure.
wind. They
Sure.
miss hearing birds. Um, they miss Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
that far away.
Interesting.
The space station orbits about 250 miles away.
Hmm.
Um, that doesn't sound like it's very far. The moon is 250,000 miles away.
It's a few
So
zeros extra.
yeah, add a couple of
Just a
zeros.
couple. Just a couple.
But when you fly like in a commercial airliner, you're maybe 40,000 feet, 39,000 feet.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's quite a bit closer to Earth than the space station.
Yeah, just a little bit.
That's about 7 miles, maybe.
What percent of
So
gravity is still present at the ISS?
so that is a great question.
Yes, I
Uh,
know because I asked it.
So it's a little bit of a misnomer when we say zero gravity. That's not really true. There's
Sure.
basically 9/10 of the same amount of gravity that you and I feel right now. The
Okay.
difference is they're in free fall. So
Sure.
they're
Okay.
falling toward the Earth. They don't hit the Earth because they're going really fast around the Earth. It's a little bit complex to think about.
Uh huh.
But I just mentioned the moon. The moon is way, way, way further away, but it's
Yeah,
still under the influence of our gravity.
that is true. That's why it's
So
still here.
that's why it's still here.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yes, there
yeah.
is gravity
I
out
didn't even
there.
think
There's
about that. Oh
yeah.
my gosh, mind blown. Oh my gosh, the moon is still here.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm talking to you. I'm learning stuff. I really. Anyway, okay. Now I'm going off on tangents now. Okay, I have my notes. I have my notes. Chronological milestones, Arctic altitude sensitivity. Oh, mobility study. I was reading about that. That was some interesting stuff. Trying to use what is it? Some enhanced technology and some virtual environments to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Talk about that a little bit, if you
So
could.
absolutely. So it's a big challenge. So I mentioned how astronauts are coming back from being in space for 6 months,
Hmm.
coming back in pretty good shape. But you know what? They're still, they're not going to just jump up out of their chair and go for a jog.
Sure.
Um, when we land on Mars, oh, actually, let me go back. When we land on Earth in a Soyuz capsule,
Hmm.
there's a whole team of medical professionals and people who are very good at getting them out of the capsule, getting them rehydrated and taken
Yes.
care of and carried around. Within a day, people are standing and walking, but it's hard to
Hmm.
do. When we go to Mars, there's not going to be a whole ground team there to help people out of the capsule and
Yeah.
get
Okay.
them going.
Sure.
So we're answering some questions now, which are how functional can we expect people to be after a
Okay.
long space flight?
Sure.
And are we kidding ourselves about how functional they're going to be when we get to Mars? And what kind of help are we going to need to provide for them? I was interested in looking at post-flight locomotor function? How well can you walk
Sure.
after you land from space? And it varies. Everybody is a little bit different. If you and I go to space
Hmm.
and we eat the same food and work out the same amount, just genetically, there may be some differences.
Okay, sure.
Um, so there's variables that we don't understand fully,
Hmm.
but can we maybe do more to help people? We looked at the possibility of some other countermeasures.
Hmm.
We use the word countermeasure to be some mitigating help. So I mentioned exercise.
Yeah.
Maybe even using some virtual reality glasses would be an interesting way to help people start getting used to thinking about being in a gravity environment,
Oh, wow. Okay.
walking. So none of these things are actually what we're doing right now,
Hmm.
but
Hmm. Hmm.
potentially things that we want to maybe involve in future space flights might
It's
be
that
interesting.
whole can it be done? What are the questions? You got to question the questions now. Now,
What are our limits?
with that, are there, do you think even in a far flung future, because I mean, how many technologies, industries actually have been started by that type of work, the work that you folks are doing. I mean, just through the entirety of the NASA space program. I mean, just from Velcro to GPS to Tang. I
Yeah.
mean, all of these different things. Now, do you think that there could even be far future, even like medical rehabilitation type applications of such a technology?
And
Um,
I'm glad you mentioned that. Absolutely. Because you know what? There's a lot of people on our planet who, after a significant injury
mhm,
or a significant period of time in bed for rehabilitation for something else, have to relearn how to walk.
mhm, mhm.
And it may very well be that some NASA technology can help with that.
Yeah,
That would be a pretty great thing.
that would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool.
It just
Possibly
depends.
even helping a lion
Depends
learn how to walk again someday.
maybe,
Who knows?
it could very well be.
I think it's really awesome. I just really just some of the stuff that I was just learning about some of the things that you've been a part of is pretty amazing. Now you said that you've always wanted to work
Yeah.
with NASA. You've always wanted to be a part of that organization. Have you always kind of thought about just things, just even on a conceptual level, at that larger, like, planetary, just big scale of just things? I mean, when you talk about, like, conceiving things, kind of, looking at the planet without borders, you're looking at the pale blue dot. You
Yeah.
know, has that been something that's just been a part of your outlook ever since you were young?
I think that's developed over time.
Hmm.
When I was a kid, I was the girl who, instead of running away from the lizard, I'd pick up the lizard, and
Yeah.
I was the kid who liked, digging around and finding worms and playing in dirt. And I'm still a little bit like that. I'm very down into the weeds.
Sure.
I was out for a run earlier today, and maybe it's part laziness, but I stop every like quarter mile and I find something. I'm like, oh, look at this cool leaf, or or the best thing I find are like owl pellets, and I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, bones, and I pick it up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I
That is
kind
pretty
of
interesting stuff.
I
Yeah.
think more of me is actually a down and in kind of person.
Okay, sure.
And thinking largely has been something that has kind of developed over time. I'm
Okay.
more of an earth sciencey person. I just really like space.
That's pretty cool. I guess that's a good answer. I like that. Okay, so what are some of the goals that you would like to accomplish as far as your studies of, being acclimating people to space? Oh my gosh, my words. Ugh, I'm sorry. I just basically it's like tossing a dictionary into a wood chipper sometimes with me. I gotta let you know.
What
Um,
words come out?
Basically, yeah. It's the this and this doesn't always link up, so it just happens like that. Anyway, so Space Lady, what are some of the things you want to do someday as far as your job doing space things with people and the environment? Go.
I'm gonna throw the same dictionary into the wood chipper and see what flies out. Um, I like learning, and I like that at NASA, we're trying to learn about us, about our planet,
Yeah.
about how to take us off of our planet and learn more. In fact, that's probably the best part, I think, of working at NASA, and that everybody, whether it's a science person or an engineer or a secretary, we all are working toward the same goals, and they're all good goals. They're like from the heart. Let's learn together. Let's work together. We work with international partners. Personally, because I'm most interested in human physiology,
Hmm.
I am very happy when people come back from space and they have not lost any bone. They're just as strong as they were. They're driving a car within a week of getting home, and they want to go back. They want to get back on
Oh,
their
wow.
rocket and go back. That makes me personally satisfied. Um, we still have a lot more to learn before we, send people to Mars. But I think that type of knowledge, when we've learned something and we can
Hmm.
apply it and are making space safer longer,
Sure.
um, and also taking next steps. Like I mentioned, this 1 year mission. I'm really happy that we're doing
No
this.
kidding.
Um, is there some risk involved? Yes. Do we think we understand all those risks? Yes. We're very cautious. We
Of
don't
course.
want to do things willy-nilly. So sometimes it feels like we might be moving slower than we could, but we have a responsibility to not be frivolous. We have
Of
a
course.
responsibility
Yeah.
to do things in a logical, sensical way, building on knowledge as we go. So I'm very excited to see what are we going to learn from a year in space. And I have my thoughts and I have my own hypotheses.
Sure.
But I'm excited to see what things actually are, what we really learn. So that's what makes me happy.
Awesome. Well, that's really awesome. I think that that's probably a good place to finish up the interview. I've got pretty much all the stuff that I need to do. You are at Spas Monkey on Twitter. It's going to be at the bottom, basically the entire time, so it's kind of an okay kind of thing. But Dr. Warren, thank you so much for being a part of the conservation equation. And then I have to do this because that was a major tenet of the last interview that I did, where I was kind of explaining about the nature of the show and how everything is a part of a big complex equation, and we're trying to bridge the gap of information. It's like the equation.
Yes.
This is the equation that's coming together. That's what
I
that's
like
all
it.
about. Yeah.
I like it.
So I have to do at least one of those conservation equations per episode.
Yes.
It's a silly thing, but whatever. But again, thank you so very much for being a part of this, and I am very excited for the things that you are going to be able to be a part of, and I hope that you keep in touch. So thank you
I
much.
will. And thank you very much for having me. Thank you for sharing your work at CARE and we're all in this together.
We are Pale Blue Dot.
Pale Blue Dot.